3 words just detonated the Indiana Fever's entire offseason strategy. Time to run it back. Caitlin Clark didn't drop that comment under Sophie Cunningham's Instagram post as a joke. This wasn't casual banter between friends. This was a public demand, broadcast to millions, putting the Fever's front office on notice. And Sophie, she fired right back. Cuddles and dinner twice a week when we reunite. Not if, when. What looked like harmless nostalgia, a throwback highlight reel from the 2025 season, just became the most consequential social media exchange in WNBA history. Because this isn't about 2 players missing each other. This is about leverage. This is about Clark using her platform to force Indiana's hand before the expansion draft rips this league wide open. The Fever now face an impossible choice: protect Sophie Cunningham and risk losing other talent, or leave her exposed and fracture the trust of the franchise player who just carried them to relevance. And with Portland and Toronto circling like sharks, ready to build new franchises around whoever Indiana leaves unprotected, the clock is ticking louder than anyone wants to admit. If you believe front offices should listen when generational talent speak, hit that like button. Because what happens next will define whether Indiana understands the league they're actually playing in. Here's what makes this so explosive. The Fever aren't just managing a roster decision, they're navigating a public relations minefield in real time, with their franchise player openly campaigning for a teammate's return. That doesn't happen by accident. Clark doesn't throw her weight around carelessly. When she says, "run it back," she's not asking. She's telling. And the entire basketball world just heard it. Let's connect the dots many of you have been pointing out for weeks. The CBA negotiations have frozen everything: free agency, salary structures, protection lists, all on pause while the league hammers out revenue sharing and new contract terms. But the moment that deal drops, teams will have days, not weeks, to finalize who they're keeping and who they're risking in expansion. Days to make franchise-altering decisions with zero margin for error. And right now, Indiana is staring down a nightmare scenario. Under expansion draft rules, every team can only protect 5, maybe 6 players. That's it. So when Portland and Toronto come calling, ready to poach unprotected talent and build instant credibility, who does Indiana choose? Kelsey Mitchell is the obvious lock. Team's leading scorer, defensive anchor, the kind of reliable production you can't replace. But then what? Do you protect Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull? Do you gamble on upside with younger players who might develop into something special? Or do you protect the glue, the heartbeat, the player your franchise star just publicly demanded you keep? Because here's the reality nobody wants to say out loud. Sophie Cunningham doesn't light up the stat sheet like Mitchell does. She's not dropping 30-point games or leading the league in any traditional category. But what she provides? You can't draft it. You can't trade for it. You can't manufacture it in training camp. She was the shield. Every time things got physical in 2025, and let's be real, it got physical constantly, Cunningham was there, taking the hits, absorbing the chaos, standing between Caitlin Clark and whatever ugliness was brewing on the court. That's not a role you fill with a free agent pickup. That's not something you replace by committee. And off the court, Cunningham was the second most searched female athlete in the United States in 2024. Not just in basketball, across all sports. Think about what that means. She's on the Volume Network hosting a flagship podcast. She's popping up on national sports shows, going viral with her takes, dragging the Fever into mainstream conversations they wouldn't be part of otherwise. This is the new WNBA, narrative-driven, personality-driven, where chemistry and cultural capital matter just as much as points per game. Sophie Cunningham is one of the few players who checks every single box, and she's chosen to build that platform alongside Caitlin Clark. So when Clark drops that comment, when she makes it public that she wants Sophie back, she's not just expressing a preference. She's making a statement about what kind of team culture actually works, about what it takes to win when the pressure is suffocating. And the entire sports world is watching your every move. The loyalty between them was forged in fire. You don't build that kind of trust through summer workouts and preseason scrimmages. You build it by living through chippy playoff atmospheres, by handling media circuses together, by knowing someone has your back when the moment gets too big for words. Cunningham protected Clark's space. She gave her room to be the generational talent everyone knows she is, without getting swallowed by the noise and the scrutiny and the constant physical targeting. That emotional safety net, that intangible leadership, once you lose it, you don't get it back. And Indiana knows this. They watched it happen all season. They saw the chemistry. They felt the cultural shift. They counted the ticket sales and the jersey numbers and the broadcast ratings that spiked every time this team took the floor. So now comes the gut check. Are they willing to gamble that they can replace what Cunningham brings, that they can find another player who protects like she does, leads like she does, and amplifies the franchise's visibility the way she does, all while ignoring the very public signal their franchise player just sent? Because if they leave Sophie unprotected, if they choose upside over identity, they're not just making a basketball decision, they're telling Caitlin Clark her judgment doesn't matter, that the connection she values can be sacrificed for theoretical future assets. And in this league, in this moment, that's the kind of message that haunts you for years. Drop a comment right now. Do you protect Sophie Cunningham, or do you gamble on someone younger? Because Indiana needs to hear what their fans actually want before they make this call. Let's talk about what happens if they get this wrong. If the Fever leaves Sophie unprotected, and Portland or Toronto snatch her up in expansion, they don't just lose a player, they lose a turnkey franchise builder. Think about what those expansion teams need on day one. Not just talent, they need identity. They need someone fans recognize immediately, someone who can sell out arenas and go viral before the first game even tips off. Sophie Cunningham is that solution wrapped in a bow. She brings instant credibility, media pull, and the kind of basketball toughness that sets a cultural tone from game one. If she's wearing a Portland or Toronto jersey next season, hosting her podcast from a new city, building a new fan base, that's not just an expansion win, that's an Indiana failure that echoes for years. And here's the part that should terrify the Fever front office. Sophie has the platform to tell her side of the story. She's not some quiet role player who fades into the background after leaving a team. She's got a microphone, literally, with regular podcast episodes and national sports show appearances. If she ends up on a new team, you can bet she'll talk about it. Not dramatically, not unprofessionally, but she'll frame the narrative, and that narrative will be simple. Indiana had the chance to keep the band together. Caitlin Clark wanted her there. The chemistry was undeniable, but the front office chose differently. That story writes itself, and it's not one the Fever want circulating while they're trying to convince fans that letting her walk was the right basketball move. Because fans remember. They remember the Instagram exchange. They remember every time Sophie stepped in when things got heated. They remember the shoulder bumps, the stare-downs, the way she had Clark's back every single night. You can't erase that with a press release about cap flexibility or roster construction theory. Reading between the lines, this is about more than one player. It's about whether Indiana understands what kind of league they're operating in now. This isn't 2015. This isn't an era where you can make cold, calculated roster moves and expect fans to just accept the logic. The WNBA is ascending on personality and narrative, on connections that feel real and bonds that fans can invest in emotionally. You strip out Sophie Cunningham. You're not just changing the rotation, you're telling fans that the chemistry they watched develop all season was expendable, that the storyline doesn't matter as much as the spreadsheet. And in this visibility-driven league, that's a dangerous message. Let's filter out the noise for a second. Some analysts will say the Fever can't afford to be sentimental, that they need to make the smart basketball decision, not the emotional one. But here's what they're missing. In modern sports, especially in the WNBA right now, the emotional decision often is the smart basketball decision. Team culture isn't some abstract concept. It's the foundation everything else is built on. You fracture that culture by ignoring your franchise players' public request, and suddenly you're not just managing a roster, you're managing a PR crisis, locker room tension, and fan disappointment all at once. The risk calculus is simple. If you protect Sophie and lose a younger player to expansion, you can recover, you can draft, you can develop, you can find talent. But if you lose Sophie and damage your relationship with Caitlin Clark in the process, what's your plan? How do you rebuild trust after telling your generational star that her judgment is secondary to front office theory? Many of you have been saying this for weeks, and you were onto something. This isn't just about who's on the protection list. It's about power dynamics. It's about whether Indiana respects Clark's voice in franchise decisions or treats her like talent to be managed rather than a partner in building something special. And the expansion teams are watching all of this play out. They see the leverage. They see the tension. If Sophie becomes available, they're not just getting a versatile defender and media personality. They're getting a player who was publicly wanted by the WNBA's biggest star and still got left behind. That's the kind of chip-on-the-shoulder motivation that fuels entire seasons. Imagine Sophie Cunningham in a Toronto jersey, opening night, sold-out crowd, national broadcast. The storyline writes itself. The player Indiana didn't protect. The defender Caitlin Clark wanted to keep. Now anchoring a new franchise with something to prove. That's not just good television. That's the kind of narrative that dominates sports media for months. And while that's happening, the Fever are back in Indiana trying to explain why they made the choice they did, why they prioritized other players, why Clark's public endorsement wasn't enough. Good luck with that press conference. You think chemistry is replaceable? Ask any team that's fumbled a franchise-defining relationship. The damage lingers. It seeps into how players view management, how they approach contract negotiations, how they talk about the organization when microphones are on and cameras are rolling. This moment will define the Fever's next 3 years minimum. Not because Sophie Cunningham is the best player on the roster, but because how they handle this decision reveals everything about how they think, how they value their stars' input, and whether they understand the league they're actually competing in. So, Indiana, here's your move. The CBA will unlock any day now. Expansion draft rules will activate. Protection lists will be due within days, not weeks. You have one chance to get this right. One chance to show Caitlin Clark that when she speaks, you listen. One chance to prove you understand that in 2026, team building is about more than stats and contracts. If you're as invested in how this plays out as we are, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that notification bell, because when those protection lists drop, we'll be breaking down every decision, every risk, and every consequence. The Fever are about to show us exactly who they are. Don't miss it. This is the defining moment. Time to see if Indiana is bold enough to protect what actually matters.